Hey, what's up? Has your palate changed with time? Mine has. Let me explain. When I was younger, there were some foods that I didn't like, obviously food that I did like, but the foods that I didn't like, I thought I would always never like that food. And the food that I did like, I always thought I would like that food. For the most part, that's true, but my palate has changed, and some of the food that I didn't like, I like now, or I don't mind now, or I even like. And some of the food that I really liked when I was younger, I don't really like as much. I do generally like the same food, but just for those ones, it's not that I hate the food anymore, but I just don't like them as much. For example, I used to not be a big fan of vegetables. There were some vegetables that I would eat and like, but a vast majority of the vegetables I didn't like. And, as a general statement, I would probably say I didn't like vegetables. Now, I actually do like vegetables, or a lot of the ones that I didn't like. For example, I didn't like carrots that much. I don't mind carrots now. Mushrooms, I didn't really like. I can tolerate them every now and then. I didn't used to like onions. Onions I like. I really like onions now. And a few other examples. For the food that I did like, I used to really like sweets. And I still do like sweets. I like chocolate. I like gummies. But I don't like them as much. And sometimes I'll have chocolate and I'll realize how sweet it actually is, and it's a bit too sweet for me now. And it's probably a palate change, but it's also probably my mind knowing that this is probably not good for me and maybe making adjustments. I have some conspiracies on why my palate has changed. One is a lot of the food that I didn't like before that I like now, or the ones that I used to like and like less now, I think are the ones that I wanted to be different. So for example, things like carrots, I knew they were good for you. They're healthy, they're good for a balanced diet. I wanted to like them. I just struggled. And things like chocolate, I knew they weren't good for me, but I just really liked them. And maybe your body somehow adapts to take that into account. After a long enough time, the manifest just becomes reality. So that's one conspiracy. The other one is maybe if you eat a certain diet or you have things outside of your diet for a long enough period, that maybe your body realizes what it's missing, what it's lacking, maybe certain nutrients from certain foods. And so it adapts the palate to not crave, but tolerate or even enjoy some of those foods because it needs to get those nutrients. And lastly, or another one, I wonder if, humans are humans and we have DNA, we have genetics, we have history. I wonder if our body or our genetics just knows about food. And so maybe when you're younger, even if you dislike a food for a certain reason, like the equilibrium point or your true self is that you actually like the food. And so despite not liking something, maybe you land liking that food or liking something less. Because onions, I'm sure onions have been around for thousands of years, and there's probably some predisposition in the DNA that makes someone know that an onion tastes good or an onion is good for you. I do wonder though, because as you age, I think your tolerance for food can change as well. So for example, some kids, they might have allergies to food and then they become adults and then they no longer have those allergies. Or as a kid or as a young adult, people don't have allergies and then they get to older age and then all of a sudden they have allergies to certain foods. So I do think palates and food tolerances change with age. Not everything is going to change, but I am curious because now that I've experienced my palate changing and knowing that my palate can change, there are still foods that I don't like that I'd like to like, and food that I probably like more than I should that I'd like to like less. So I'm curious to know how that plays out in more time. A couple more examples of food that I didn't like but I like now actually that just came to me is capsicums or bell peppers. I didn't used to like them. I used to really like the smell of them on pizzas though, and now I'll have them on pizzas and they taste great. Same with coffee. I always liked the aroma of coffee, but my parents actually used to say don't drink coffee. I didn't drink coffee until I was 30. And then I dabbled a little bit with mochas, which were great. It's a nice gateway to coffee if you're into chocolate milk. And I think the transition actually would have been hard from no coffee to a black coffee, personally for me. And even from mochas to black coffee would have been a little bit tough, hot black coffee. But for some reason, an iced Americano was just hit a little bit different. And so now I'm actually drinking, when I drink coffee, I go for iced Americanos. And that actually brings up an interesting point, is that you can find there are these gateway foods that open up new worlds. And yeah, for example, for vegetables, onions was a pretty big gateway for me because that was really the first vegetable out of the ones that I didn't like that I started to like, and it really did open up a whole new world. I know that's not always the case. You know, some people dislike a food when they're young and then their palate never changes. Well, I don't know actually, like, I don't want to project anything, but anyways, curious to know if anyone else's palate has changed like mine has with age, what the reason was, what the hypothesis is, because yeah, those were mine. Thanks for watching. See you next time.